Welcome to Moodboard. We're two creatives helping you unlock your creative potential through meaningful conversation. This is episode 5. I'm Aaron.
And this is Cesar.
Over the last couple of episodes, we've been talking about what to do when things unexpectedly shift or change. We talked about setting ourselves up for success, how to future-proof our careers, and on the previous episode, we touched on portfolios, and I think it'd be a good idea to dive in a little deeper on that topic. So why don't you kick us off with your thoughts on what makes a solid, compelling portfolio?
That's a great question because that's one of the biggest dilemmas as creative designers, that no matter where you are in your career, that's how you present yourself to companies, or that's how you get new business, is that body of information and visuals that, with the right balance, with the right ingredients, it could be really powerful, and it could be what gets you the job, what gets you the project. So this is something that we have to be really mindful of, in terms of that this piece of work, it's really important, and it shouldn't be taken lightly. And what makes a great portfolio for me, in my experience, has been well curated visuals and information, like the right balance, and also great documentation, like great visuals, great process photos. Not necessarily has to be a process book, but it has to, in an artistic way, it has to capture the feeling or the energy of the project. And so for me, a concise portfolio, which means 3 projects, and the reason why I say 3 projects, it's because that's probably the time that you have to go through a portfolio during an interview. However, you could always do a beefed up version that you just share for people just to have. That could be up to 5 projects, but I wouldn't do more than 5. And to me, another reason that makes a strong portfolio would be consistency, in terms of, if you're applying for a footwear design role, make sure that the 3 projects that you're showing in your portfolio are footwear related, because it will be tough to try to convince HR or a director that, hey, I can do shoes, or I want to do shoes, but the experience that I have is, I don't know, making other kinds of products. So, in other words, your portfolio has to convince the other person that you are able to do the job that they're looking for to fulfill.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think whenever you do a career shift or a career change, you can I remember back when I made the transition from focusing on industrial design to digital product design, I had this temptation to keep my previous projects on there, show the breadth of work, but in reality, that wasn't very, like, that wasn't relevant to what people were looking for to hire in a digital product designer. So I think that's a really good point, to make sure that it's focused on the role that you're trying to land next.
Yeah, and that's one of the advice I give to people, that yes, use the same tools that footwear designers, or let's say, we'll use Illustrator, but that doesn't mean that we're graphic designers. So what I'm trying to get at is that, okay, you use the same tools, than the job that you want to pursue, the new job that you want to pursue. Okay, show me that you can use those tools in a way that, in the way that we use them for the job that you want. For example, would be, let's say you do 3D modeling for automotive, but you want to get into footwear, and the easiest way to land a job in footwear would be in 3D, because you're already using 3D. Now, all you have to do is 3 projects, footwear related, where you're using 3D, which you can, but the application has to be footwear, and you have to show that you can translate to the assets into a digital realm. And that's the advice that I give, is that you have to show projects that are relevant to the field of work that where you want to be. And that implies you have to take the time to work on projects that highlight your skills for you to at least have a chance to get an interview, because that's all you need to have higher chances of breaking into another industry or into fulfill an interest of yours. So yes, I always advise to take the time and do projects that apply to the job that you want.
Yeah, it's a great point. Like amplifying your what your focus is already and finding like the link that's going to give you that competitive advantage in your next chapter. It's a great point. I wonder what makes like what is the process for you when you're telling the story of a particular footwear design? What does that structure look like in terms of like a case study? How do you format that, or how do you go about thinking about that?
So there are several ways to kickstarting a footwear project, and this is common industry practice what I'm going to share. So one scenario could be that there is a manufacturing process that the brand wants to take advantage of, or they want to explore more because it fits the aesthetics that they're looking for. So a good example would be the company wants to make a shoe like the Crocs, which is an injected EVA shoe. So then you're already restrained by the manufacturing process and by the things that you can achieve aesthetically. So that right there is a project brief for you to go off from. And okay, when they tell you we want an injected EVA shoe, or let's say in industrial design, we want a product that is vacuum formed, you already start thinking towards a product that could be made by using a vacuum form machine. So in a similar fashion, when they tell you, okay, we want an injected EVA shoe, then you are the manufacturing process and what's gonna be achievable. So you start designing within those constraints, within those aesthetics, and then that's your starting point. Another scenario, it's also a material specifically, where the brand could say, hey, we have a lot of this material. Can we find an application for this material so that we can use it? This scenario happens often when the company is a supplier, or is this company that has a lot of inventions, but they have yet to find applications for those discoveries, for those innovations. Happens quite often. And that could be another starting point for a project where, hey, we have this, I don't know, this type of leather, this type of fabric. It does this, it does that. It's very good for this, it's very good for that. Please find an application for it. So you could say, let's say the material is waterproof. Then you could think about doing a shoe that is great for outdoors, for hiking, for trail running, something like that. So the material could also be a starting point for a project. And then another way to kickstart a project, it could be like pure fiction. Oh, what would a shoe look like in this movie, or in this movie, or in a utopian world? What would a shoe look like? So then it's like a different angle to kickstarting in a different with a different perspective what a shoe could look like. And then also I think one more example, and this is gonna be the last one, could be price point. Price, I think price is a good restraint, because it makes you resourceful. In as designers, as important as creatives, that's a very important challenge. Because with price, you're limited to what you can do. However, I think there are many ways for achieving what you want to achieve in a different way, and then also like you could market it in a different way to make sure that it's still a compelling product. So price sometimes is another starting point for a project.
Which one is your favorite starting point?
I so there I really enjoyed the price point one, especially now, because for a lot of people the economy situation is not the best, not the ideal. So I think a lot of people right now are a little bit more mindful, and they're just willing to spend more time looking for what they need to get a product that is the best bang for their buck type of situation. And I love that challenge of, hey, give me the best shoe that $90 can get you. And then you start like exploring, okay, what can I do within those restraints? What process, what materials fit those fit that bill, and still make a profit, because at the end of the day you have to pay for making that shoe.
Yeah.
And so it's a good challenge. It's a fun restraint to have to work within. And I think price is important because when I think about when Lexus broke into the luxury car market, when they came to the States, they offer a car as good as the German ones, if not better, reliable. For I think it was like half of the cost or less. It was for less. So we're giving you better, more for less, and it's reliable. So I think when I think of those scenarios or where there were breakthroughs, often price and cost is a factor in that play.
Yeah, going back to the idea of like how do you thinking about the narratives of a particular case study in your portfolio. I see what you've described as being the exposition of the story, right? Like where in any story, there's if you look at the story arc, the beginning point of a story is the exposition. First, you have to be introduced to the characters, the background, the scene, the context in which the story can happen. And then the call to action is the thing that sets you off on that journey, right? So it's that constraint, which can be a price point, it can be a new manufacturing process, it can be whatever it is that is putting you on that journey that will eventually lead to the end result or the final design. So I think keeping that in mind as you're working through your case study will help you know what is important and relevant to keeping that story going and giving it a rhythm, right? Making it feel like it's moving forward. And I think it also applies to the process of presenting work as well for when the portfolio lands you an interview. If you write your case study in a way that flows like a story, it makes that delivery, that voiceover that you might be giving in a presentation a lot easier. Would you agree or disagree?
Totally agree. It will make it, I think, how you present a portfolio. You could have the right visuals, the right, I don't know, infographics. You could have all that dial in. But if the way you present it is not engaging, it doesn't carry the same weight. So you have to be mindful of balancing, make sure, yes, your visions are on point, but make sure that the way you present it is on point, the vocabulary that you use, the way you flow from step to step, from project to project. And always saying in every project why, like briefly explaining why this project is in your portfolio. Oh, because it taught me how to be this and this, or because, oh, it had an impact in my career, in my learning, because it unlocked the following project that I'm going to present. So then you present the following project type of situation. But yeah, making sure that how you present it and then how you describe it, how you walk, how you narrate, it's very important. And then this is where practice comes into play. If you're prepared and you have practice, when it's really the time for you to present your interview for a real case scenario, then you're not gonna be scared or doubtful. You're gonna be confident. And that's how you have to present your portfolio. Confident that the work that you have done is work that can benefit the company that you want to work for. And you can, it goes a long way, and it could be a deciding factor, because what's going to happen is that how you present your ideas, that's something that the company that is interviewing you is paying attention to, because you're going to have to do that at their company. You're going to have to present their ideas. So if you can prove them that you can do it for your work, then that gives them the green light, or the confidence that, like, okay, he can do it for us. So always be mindful that what you do for yourself, they're seeing if you can do it for them.
Are there any things that come to mind that you've picked up on throughout your career that you would like to share about just like how to make a presentation of your thinking, of your work, like much better?
I think this depends on the project, because not all projects, sometimes we're not part of projects from start to end. So like you don't have material to show, let's say, in terms of like research, ideation, prototyping, final delivery. Sometimes we don't have all of that. Sometimes we were just part of sketching, or sometimes we were just part of prototyping. And but what you did in that project, let's say if you just did one thing, and but you can say, okay, what I did, even though it was small, it helped make the project successful, and that's okay. So they're gauging there how much involvement you had in a project will help you assess how you're gonna show your project, and how you're gonna talk about it. But often I try to structure very similarly to what Simon Sinek say, where he's the author of the book Start with Why. I think that to me has been like a guiding star. I might not follow it like step by step, but it helps me articulate what I'm trying to convey, what I'm trying to say. Where he says you start with why, then with how, and then with what. And he gives a clear example, the Apple example, which is that we want to challenge the status quo by making beautiful products, or like by making beautiful, yeah, by making beautiful products. So then you're like, in that phrase you're explaining why you're doing what you're doing and how you're doing it. So I
That's
think
a
that
great one.
sometimes, yeah, that sometimes is a good resource to have in hand, to, okay, I'm trying to lay something out and explain it. Okay, this is a good way to break it down. And but yeah, often like anything marketing or like sales pitch, the good ones can be good examples to follow, good role models that you
Yeah.
can take and utilize for your portfolio or just for you.
Yeah, I think that book, and there's a TED Talk as well, if people want to check that out, is it taps into that emotional factor, that emotional core of why you set off on a journey in the first place, right? What it was, the force that drives an endeavor. And I think that's a really good way to start a story and framing the motivation behind the effort that you're about to show people. And it also gets them invested in what you want to hear, or in what you want them to hear, because it almost feels like you're letting them in on a secret, right? Like in on the behind the scenes. I've been rewatching Mad Men. Have you seen it?
Yes, I love it.
Yeah. Do you remember
Yes.
that there's so many great scenes where Don Draper, the creative director of the agency, is making presentations, and
It's
he
so
does it
good.
with such right, like there's so many key iconic scenes.
Yes, it's so effortless, natural. We're offering the best product. People are gonna love it. This is gonna change the world type of thing. But
Yeah,
he, yeah, I like that show because that's what we do. And I don't think we have to be in a creative field to say, oh, you have to sell ideas or like visual assets. It's just anything that you do is something that you have to, it takes persuasion, and you have to make a case. You have to
hmm
have solid arguments why something is going to work, or what is that I'm presenting to you that is different from the rest. And I
that
think I'm trying to think of a quote that has stuck with me from Mad Men, and I believe is that people pay you to think about things that they don't want to think about. I think it was something along those lines, or like people pay you to do
yeah,
things they don't want to do.
there's some great
And
great quotes.
yeah, there are so many great quotes, but those for me are very, has stuck with me because we have to, as designers, as creatives, we have to show, we have to share what hasn't been seen yet. And then, like something that is new that people are not familiar with, they, I don't want to say they're skeptical, but they're gonna be a little bit like doubtful because they haven't seen it. But if you show them in an engaging, appealing way, they they'll see that as a way for them. Oh, if he's selling really well his work, then he can really sell our ideas. Because you're either selling products or service,
Yeah.
and you have to think. You have to think with that mindset.
Let's say that you are about to present your portfolio. What are some recommendations that you could give listeners on preparing?
I would say make sure that you have practiced before how much time to spend on each project. And I would say practice a concise version of what you're going to talk about, and then practice a little bit of more details version, because you don't know, often people join more people join the interview than you thought of or that you expected. And also throughout the project there could be questions, so you have to be prepared to present your portfolio like really quick, because you have to leave room for questions and answers, also for people just want to talk about how you work, and then also the housekeeping questions about the job, and they try to cramp all of that in half an hour. So that's why you being prepared for the short concise version, and then being prepared for the more detailed version of your portfolio, because you don't know in reality what kind of interviewer you're going to get. And I have experienced good interviews, and I have experienced not so good interviews, where the good ones to me are the ones that are like more of a conversation, and the ones that are a little bit like loose, because I think there is a lot of raw, just like raw knowledge that you get to see from someone, and then a little bit of the personality, of course, versus the ones that are not so good because they're a little bit like question answer question answer question answer, so it feels very like black and white. And those are the experiences that I have with interviews, and I think that's, based on that, will help you assess how to tackle your portfolio.
Yeah, I think you mentioned like the pacing and the timing of, I think that's very key in practicing your story and your delivery. And I always like to also think about what are questions that I would ask? What are questions that if I wasn't aware of the project, actually what I tend to do is I go outside to another, like a friend or a colleague that I'm close with, and I ask them, what would you ask a designer of my experience for something like this, like that, it's to try to find questions that I wouldn't have expected, right? And then be able to have answers for that, or at least, or sometimes I figure out that I don't have answers for that, and then I, try to get some answers on that. But so timing and also being prepared for unexpected questions, having more thorough answers ready to go. So that was portfolio. Now, one of the questions that came up in a couple of episodes or several episodes back was this question of the importance of space. And we want to dedicate an episode to this in the future, but as we're thinking about unexpected changes and creating a portfolio that accurately represents our work and our process and where we want to go into the future, how can we create a space that facilitates creativity? In your experience, how would we go about this?
It's important to point out first, why is space important in terms of like physical space where we create, where we work, where we spend time. And the reason why this is relevant and people should pay more attention is because the space where we create sometimes, or I would say often, influences what we create. And I believe that for me, when you are in the process of, let's say, reinventing yourself professionally, or looking for, okay, I'm ready to redo my portfolio because I feel like what I'm into now is not necessarily the same things that I'm into before. So what you like now is different. The aesthetics that you're into are different now. So like you wanna create like a new portrait of yourself as a creator because you feel like this new version of you is better and it's gonna help you get a better job, get a better project, land a better client. And so it is important for us that when we're in this process of reinventing ourselves, that we place ourselves in environments that are nurturing. And by that, a good example would be a library. A library is a good place where you could have a lot of resources at hand, but it's also a good resource for you or good place for you to focus and do work. And if you need to step out and be creative, you can be right there and then, because you can go and just browse through an aisle. You see a cover that catches your attention. You look into the book. Oh, this is really cool. How didn't I run into this book? How didn't I see this visual? I wouldn't have created this project, or I wouldn't have created this aesthetic into my portfolio. So like we have to place ourselves in environments where ideas can thrive and where we can have quick access to uh, different assets that can help us curate and nurture something that we're proud of, that resembles who we are. And I'm just curious to hear your thoughts, Aaron, about how do you feel about what are the best places that you think could help a creative create like really meaningful work.
First off, I love your answer about the library because it's such an important thing to have all of these portals like ready for you to just go into. And that's a really beautiful place to be in to create new connections. I think the environment that I lean towards when I'm in a project that either I need new ideas or I need to have some kind of overcome some kind of mental obstacle is museums. And it's a temporary environment, but I find that going to the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City and similar museums from cities that I've visited puts you in the context of human history and reminds you what came before, and it reminds you that there's this panoramic view of human creativity that you can reference, and being placed in a different setting temporarily, at least, because you can't set up. Maybe if you're Phoenix, I think they set up in the Louvre to write their latest album, which is so cool, by the way. I think that's so awesome that they were able to just record in that space. But it allows you for this temporary reminder and contextualization of thinking. But as far as like my own like studio space, I like to maintain those books. Even if I can't go to a library, I curate the library at home or in the studio, making each addition to the library, even if I'm not going to reference it for this particular project, I think each book adds the possibility of later on being a future asset to the journey. So I also think that taking walks, like I was going to mention that the walks that I've gone, like I go on, I want to do them more often, because allowing that space between the place where I'm working to breathe a bit and allow for my eyes to see something else, I think is very important. And movement too. I That's how I see it. I think having a very clean space as well, organized, and maybe with a little sprinkle of chaos here and there. I think that is very important, because order and gives a sense of serenity, a sense of design.
That's interesting you mentioned movement because we often don't associate creation or creating something while we're on the go or moving because we have the excuse, oh, we're moving. But it could be a good moment for us to pay attention because if something looks really good passing by, then that could. What I'm trying to get at is that when you're moving, I think you perceive things differently, shapes differently, colors differently, and you might get something else out of it by just moving. That's very interesting because I think often we are creating when we're like stagnant, like sitting down or standing up, but we're just like in one place.
Right.
And that's very interesting. You say that because I'm gonna bring up a case scenario, which is in regards of how the "I love New York" slogan was invented, and the guy who did it, he say the idea came to him when he was in a taxi in New York, and I think he must have seen elements that made him connect the dots for him to say, "Oh, why don't I just do I, heart, and why?" And that
That's so
became
good.
that became they say it's like the most iconic logo in the
Yeah.
world, and that's all it took, a taxi ride to come out with such an iconic piece. And I think we have to put ourselves in those situations more often. And I don't necessarily say force it, but be mindful.
Schedule it in, right? Like schedule in the occasional walks. I wouldn't have thought that the inside of a taxi could be a creative studio, but anywhere you are can, like anywhere your mind is, new connections can happen. I love that putting your yourself in different scenarios in different settings can spark things as new things, because oftentimes like you're at your desk and you're staring at a piece of paper, you're working in front of a screen, you get notifications left and right, and the creation process, I think, is a lot more, how would you say, it's such a sacred process. I think it needs the space and the quietness and just like there's something going on in the subconscious that needs space to happen, right? There's this like book called The Art of Thought, and Graham Wallace writes about the creative process, and there's multiple stages, and one of the stages is work. All this research, all this like heavy lifting, all this thinking, and then he actually stresses, this is one of the most important part, stop thinking about it. Whatever it is, just move away from it and do something else. Do whatever it takes to get your mind off of it, because in this time, in this process, something in the subconscious, which you can't directly access, happens. And there is that element in moving, in being in a different place, in walking. And I just keep thinking back to something my trainer a couple years said to me, which is we are designed to move. Our bodies we're designed to run, to chase after things. And when we're sitting at our desk or when we're static, we're not doing what we're designed to do. And when, as creators, we're spending so much time using our minds, it's also worth thinking, how can I also use my body? Because they're two, but they're one, but they're not one, they're two. It's
Is we're together, but we're not mixed, but we're together.
right. Exactly.
No, that's a very good point. And we have to be mindful of everything that we do affects what we create and how we create. And I don't know if this is a misconception, but creativity or like work output is not a formula. It's not 1 + 1 = 2. It's more of like timing and how you're feeling, what you're feeling also dictates what you create. So that's why the space, which can make you feel a certain type of way, will influence your thoughts, your mood, which is going to influence what it's going to influence your thoughts, and then your thoughts are going to influence your actions.
Yeah, 100%.
And this is an example why writers like to write out of hotel rooms. It's because I feel like they expose themselves just to new environments. So maybe like to spark any creative output. But also I feel like they go to hotel rooms to have no distractions. Because I feel like for me working from home is very challenging. Because I feel like home for me is a place to rest, not a place to work. And yes, I work from home, but for me it's not the ideal scenario. And that's a challenge that now a lot of people have today, is that I work from home, I do what I can type of situation, but or I don't have a commute. But I think we should explore those topics around how to craft your own creative routine or like a creative ritual to help you to help tell your brain like, hey, we're on creative mode.
Yeah.
And then also how to turn off, because when we turn off, that's when we recharge.
Yeah, you bring up something like this ritual idea. I have this book somewhere around here where it's a collection of artist rituals and all kinds of like writers, painters, poets, whatever creative person. I think I saw Picasso's, Mozart. So I don't know where they got this info. Someone did their research, but the idea of working from home and being as just a normal person living but also working in the same environment, I think the idea of a ritual, idea of a routine can bring about a sense of time dividers and sort of partition walls, if you will, not in the physical world in that physical sense, but in the mental sense of, okay, I'm going to go on this walk And after this walk, I'm going to go back home to the studio, and now I'm in creative mode because we've a lot of us are now working from home and we don't have a place necessarily to go to. But I love this idea of having some separation, because there is one thing that I don't like to do, for example, is if I'm in relaxation mode, if I'm in reading mode, I don't want to see any of my screens. I don't want my screens to look at me. I don't want to be near my phone because the temptation is too strong. And the best way to have self control is to not have to exercise self control. And putting away these things is very important. And creating a space that encourages that disconnection, I think, is very, very key. Yeah.
No, this is very great points to take into consideration, because I this especially the book about creative ritual, it's important to know about. And the reason why I say this is because these artists, designers, creatives are successful.
Mhm.
And I think we can segue into, let's say, this segment about best creative practices, in terms of, hey, if these people that were like that we consider highly creative, if they did this and it helped them reach the levels that they reach and be successful and everything, what are the things that you saw in that book, or just in general things that you have seen that has helped people reach success by doing these practices? So a quick analogy would be, if you want to become a millionaire and you study 10 people that are millionaires and you do what they did, there are higher chances that you will become a millionaire, because you are emulating their ritual, their approach, their habits, which is going to help you reach the millionaire status. In a similar way, what are some of the those rituals that you think that could help you unlock the creative potential that we're always looking for?
Yeah. I think one of the things that I've noticed from reading these rituals is the importance, first off, of having a ritual, of doing the same things every day. That is itself an accomplishment. Designing that ritual is probably step number one for a being consistent and in that effort, because it's like that Herculean efforts are by that one consistent thing, right? Like it's not one act, it's a consistent just way of being. And another thing that stood out to me is just, and one famous example of this is that from what I've read, that Steve Jobs would have meetings in a walk. Like he would make big decisions on a walk. Like they would take walks and they would be outside, they would move to make, to think through things or make really important decisions. And a lot of these writers as well that I've seen in the rituals, they had a ritual walk. They purposefully went on walks. And I think that finding what works for you and doing it consistently is probably the most important thing. Another thing too, especially for artists, is the ritual of finding the themes that you are revisiting. Because I had this professor once say, this art professor say that artists don't wake up and go, I wonder what I'm going to do today. They have themes that they go to and that they are continuously exploring and diving into. And so when you've created a ritual, a series of things that you do consistently every day, those themes become a lot more apparent, and you are able to go deeper into things that otherwise, if you wake up every morning and you're wondering like, I wonder what I'm going to do today, or like your brain is still, it's like for the same reason why like Steve Jobs and people who subscribe to the idea of wearing the same thing every day, it's to have less decisions to make. That's touching on that. It's like your brain every single day has like a battery life of how much decisions you can make. And if you decrease the amount of useless decisions and you predetermine what you are going to be having for lunch, dinner, breakfast, and all that ahead of time, and what you're going to be wearing, like you're free to think about more higher creative, higher frequency things, right? Your ritual, you're almost running on like automatic, right? It's like a computer program, right? Like the program's already written. You just have to run it.
And this is important because when we dial in all the things that take away from our work, from our creative endeavors, I think that will yield for a better portfolio. That will
Absolutely.
yield for
100%. Yeah.
a better deck to potentially gain new client, new project. And we have to take care of all those things before we embark in this journey of, oh, I'm gonna work on my portfolio, and I wanted this to be like a very good experience, like a good journey. But we have to make sure that we set ourselves time to do that
Right.
mindfully. And yeah, it's I love that. I love also the contrast between inside and outside. Like we have to be outside so that the things that are inside can better come outside. So it's like a
That's really
very
good.
interesting concept of, oh,
Yeah.
when we're inside and we're trying to get things inside our mind. It's sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but often you go outside and things that are inside of you flow better
Right.
outside, going outside.
That's really good. Going outside to get the things that are inside outside.
Yeah.
That's really good. One thing that I wanted to add to this, the idea of time and how in any successful design business, there is two things that have to happen. First, the time has to be managed properly, or else the finances will not be managed properly, right? One thing that I started doing last year with a lot more consistency is writing down. So I start my day with the date, and then I write from the time that I wake up to the time that maybe like 12, I write down my activities. And I've been doing this for several months now. And what that has done for me is eliminated the question of where did the day go? There it is. Here's the receipt. This is where the day went. And when you are creating a portfolio, it's, if you like, you have to, I think, monitor with where your time is going, because you don't have forever to work on it. And sometimes we can fall into this perfectionism mode where, oh, I want to get it to be so good. But reality, you have to have a reality check and say, hey, this thing has a job. And the job is present myself in a great way so that I can get an interview, so that we can either land a client or land a new role and get to work. And I think holding yourself accountable for where your time goes is the beginning to anything, to like financial opportunities. Where is your time going? Because that's the most valuable resource you have, right?
Yes. And I think this is where this statement comes into play, where often I think a lot of the, not problems, but a lot of the situations we're into, they can be solved with 90% attitude, 10% knowledge. That's usually the ratio that it takes for you to resolve a problem. And
Mm.
because there was and I say this because, and I think it applies to our conversation, because there was a study of millionaires And what it takes to gain financial independence is basic math. If you have two and you spend three, you're minus one. So don't do that. But it takes attitude for you to do the right math. It takes attitude for you to not overspend, or no, don't go over your budget. If you have five, don't go around trying to spend 10 because you're going to be in the negative. But it all comes down to attitude. And they say in one of the points towards the end of the study is that, yeah, it takes 90% attitude, 10% knowledge to usually
Mm.
achieve what you want to achieve.
Would you say that attitude itself is another way of saying mindset? Like it comes from the mindset of like
Yes.
how you, okay. Yeah, because I do think that when you have already like this, a lot of people have knowledge of that basic math, right? They can add, but those going back to the subconscious of being, for example, overly optimistic with your finances and landing yourself into trouble in that way, or purchasing something that you probably should delay in purchasing because it's not a priority right now, but it's a new thing that just came out and we really want it. And you know that you shouldn't get it, but you get it anyways, and then you learn the hard way that wasn't a good idea. It goes back to just like changing the way we think about what's our why? Why are we even doing this, right? It's like, for example, like I just keep thinking about like the newest iPads that just came out, right? Like they promise all these different things. They're thin. The new pencil, it can do all kinds of different little things. And Cesar, I was like, the whole time I'm just like, guys, a sketchbook and a pen. I know they're not the same, but with a little skill, you can do all those things. And a piece of paper is 0.004 millimeters or something like that. It's the thinnest you can get. And I think it's really just, it comes down to just like being honest with yourself and being like, okay, do you really want this cutting edge new thing display? Or do you want to be a great illustrator, a great artist, or great whatever? Because a sketchbook and a pen will do the same thing if you know put in the work.
Yeah. And I'm glad you mentioned that because there is a book, or I think I learned this during my applied creative thinking class in college. And where there is an example or a dilemma about a better pen won't automatically make you a better artist or better at drawing. So the fact that you have a pencil or a pen or whatever writing utensil, it doesn't equal skill. It doesn't equal talent. It comes from you in terms of a mindset, discipline, practice that makes you a good artist, but Apple is selling you the idea that you're gonna be a better person by having our products. And that's bottom line what comes across, but it's not necessarily what they say during their marketing campaigns. It's like, if you have our products, you'll be a better person or you'll be a better at doing what you're trying to do. But it often doesn't translate. And I know because I used to have I have the iPad Pro like first generation or something. And
Yeah,
then I bought recently, not this latest, but the one before iPad Pro, and see no difference.
yeah,
Besides the hardware and like a couple things here and there, but it's like practically what I'm doing, like sketching and rendering,
yeah.
is the same.
Right.
And the only difference was that for the previous one you have to spend 1400, but you're still doing the same. So I think that's a dilemma and a situation we have to be better at evaluating, is that, is this piece of equipment that is worth 1400 gonna equal me, I don't know, success, or will make me a better designer? Probably not. Probably a used iPad Pro from a couple generations before will get the job done for a fraction of the cost, And you don't necessarily need the shiniest thing for you to be successful at what you do. I think this could be a topic of conversation for the next episode. It's about
Yeah.
the importance of being resourceful.
Right. Yeah. I think we should, I think we should, in the next one, maybe we can ask our audience who is listening now, would you like us to talk about being resourceful and managing your resources? Because the more I learn about business and the deeper I dive into it, the more understanding, the more I understand that just as much as being creative and coming up with original, fresh new takes and new ideas is important, managing the business that facilitates that is equally important, and it really comes down to managing time and managing financial resources. So I think that's going to be a very important topic to unlock the potential of everyone who is listening to these conversations. And on that note, I think it's a good way to send off this episode 5 of the Mood Board. We thank you so much for listening. My name is Aaron,
And this is Cesar.
and this is the Mood Board, where we have meaningful conversations to unlock your creative potential. We appreciate you listening, and we'll see you in the next one.
Take care.
Thank you, everybody.